It's funny, Dana, that you mentioned AI earlier, because I feel like in the last few weeks, I feel like suddenly the ground is kind of shifting beneath our feet in what it means to be in this modern world. I feel like even just a few weeks ago, AI was something that people in Silicon Valley talked about. And suddenly, it's everywhere. I was reading a piece this morning in the Washington Post about they're researching AI, how AI jokes come across in comedy clubs because they want to teach the AI the humor. Like, it's astounding, and I'm reeling at the speed of all of it. I'm reeling at the speed that I'm seeing our world change. My grandmother, before she died, she was 83 when she passed, and we had a beautiful conversation, and she said, I've seen more change in the last 20 years than I did in the first 60 years of my life. And it's true. The pace of change is speeding up. Michael and I were talking this week about it and about how we both kind of feel like the ground is shifting beneath our feet. And we were talking about the deep fake videos they can make now, where they can literally make anyone look like they are saying or doing anything. And the thing that keeps coming up for me is this question of how will we ever know what's true anymore? And if we don't know what's true, how can we hold ourselves and each other accountable? Like, I might be worrying about it more than is warranted, but it's keeping me up at night. But this idea of how can I know what is true, it reminded me of a memory I have with my own dad. I was a little girl, 5, maybe 4 years old, and we were walking and holding hands. My daddy always held my hand. And we were walking and holding hands, and I said, Daddy, how do I know that the blue that I see in the sky is the same blue that you see in the sky? How do I know that your sky isn't purple or green or red? What would it be like to have a red sky, Daddy? Is your sky red? And my sweet daddy didn't have a clue what to do with me, bless his heart. He said, I love your curious mind. And that was it. Like, that was then Walmart. Like, that was my life. I love you, Daddy. Thank you so much for parenting me. But in that childlike wonder, I think I actually asked a pretty deep question. How do I know that what I'm seeing is truth? How do I know that my truth is true for others? How do we know? I don't actually remember how I answered that question, so I'm going to come back over here. Oh, we talk about, I'm a little verklempt. Faith, you verklempt me. We talk about the still small voice and, that voice of truth within that we can hear when we get quiet and we get still. And the more we listen to it, the more we can hear it. And how, you can tell the difference between that still small voice of truth and your own voice of truth, because that still small voice is life-giving and affirming and expansive, right? We talk about the still small voice, but I've come to the conclusion that there's actually much more that is guiding us towards truth. You see, you are a living particle of the divine walking this planet. You come from light, you're made of light, and you're going to return to light when this journey is over. 100 years ago, Ernest Holmes wrote, "A new light is coming into the world. We are on the borderland of a new experience." He was absolutely correct. And do you know why? Because that new light that he was talking about, it's here. It's you. You are the light that Ernest Holmes was prophesizing 100 years ago. And the world is on the verge of something entirely new because you are here, because you're in it. There's a property of light that's unique as far as we know, in that light can act like both a particle and a wave. It can act like two different things at once. And the same is true of you. You have this sacred ability to be perfectly human, to love, to make choices, to be aware and awake and alive. And you have the ability to be divine, to love unconditionally, to make choices that increase the good for all, to create, to be conscious. Just like light, you get to be both things at once. You are both because you are the light of truth. And this is why we feel a resonance in our bodies when we're in contact with the truth. How many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you can feel it? Yeah. So it's not just the voice of that quiet, still small voice of truth that we're listening for. We're also listening for that feeling of resonance in our bodies that tells us that we're touching the truth. So when the world starts to shake beneath your feet, when you're confused, when you're not sure where to turn to find what's true, you have the very truth right where you are, because you are the very truth right where you are. The key is to stop and to listen. I have this thing when I feel that reverent, that resonance of truth. I actually feel it in my breastbone, like right in my power chakra here. I know there are some people who feel it in their hearts. They just have this heart wisdom knowing of truth. I know people who recognize it in their brains, right? Yes, no. And they just have this mental knowing, right? In the Celtic tradition, there's this old saying, I can feel it by the pricking of my thumbs. Have you ever heard that? The pricking of my thumbs? Your resonance of truth gets to be wherever it is for you. For me, it's here. And I can feel it when I'm in touch with the truth. So I've been thinking a lot about this crazy world we live in and this very interesting time in history. Is that a blessing or a curse? May you live in interesting times. But I really have come to the conclusion that we have an opportunity here. We are at a point of opportunity, and we can make a dramatic shift in the healing of this planet and in ourselves. We're at a point of choice, and I have to believe, as the great Dr. Martin Luther King said, I have to believe that love will have the final word here. You know, that's what happened on June 19th, 1865. Love had the final word that day. This was the day when General Gordon Granger of the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas, and ended slavery in the last remaining slave state. We're talking about Juneteenth here. I have a picture of the actual proclamation for you that he brought with him and read there on the beach in Galveston. And this was almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. 2 years until the last slave state was finally set free. Y'all, I grew up in Texas. I spent many a summer day in Galveston, right on that bay where that proclamation was read. And I never once heard of Juneteenth. I was not taught it. It was completely buried away. I wasn't taught that people were forced to remain slaves, to have forced family separation, to live with the horror of slavery and all that it entails for a whole other 2 years. I am so glad that Juneteenth is now a federal holiday and we all have an opportunity to learn about it. Yeah. So I wanted to learn more about it. Y'all know me. So I went and I found this beautiful piece by a museum specialist and oral historian at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Her name is Kelly Navies, and she wrote this. She said, each year when my family celebrates Juneteenth, our flyers boldly request that each guest bring something red. Did you know that red is tied to Juneteenth? We then add examples like red soda pop, watermelons, apples, or even red beans. Folks bring these items without much thinking about their origin, but in fact, the roots of the symbolic efficacy of the color red can be traced to West Africa, where it has been associated with strength, spirituality, life, and death, the color red. Furthermore, culinary historians trace the color to certain foods that traveled to the Americas along with the Africans during the transatlantic slave trade, such as hibiscus and the kola nut. So this year at Juneteenth, as you take a long swallow from a cool drink of hibiscus iced tea or red punch, remember the ancestors who sacrificed. Remember the bloodshed and struggle. Remember the collective strength of the people of the African diaspora. And finally, remember the spirituality and transcendent joy that enabled us to overcome. Isn't that beautiful? We have so much to learn from this rich history of ours. We have so much inspiration to be gained from our past when we pay attention to it. I love what she said. Remember the spirituality and transcendent joy that enabled us to overcome. This is light. This is people remembering the truth of who they are. This transcendent joy is the light of truth, and it feeds us and sustains us in times of trial. Light. You are light. The summer solstice is this week. Do you remember way back to the winter solstice? 6 whole months ago, back before AI was part of our daily conversation. It was a whole other world back then. Do you remember when we celebrated the return of the light and we pledged to be a conduit of that light, that good, that grace for ourselves and this planet? Do you remember 6 months ago? How are we doing with that? This week here in the Northern Hemisphere, we sit in the fullness of the power of the sun as the earth prepares to tilt back the other way to prepare for autumn. And I took a minute this week to think about all of that power, all of that energy that is being fed to us from the sun. There would be no life without it, no food without the sun, right? All of that energy is coming towards us all the time, but it's not just coming from the earth. The energy that feeds you is also coming from the sun. It's also coming from the earth. It's also coming from the people around you. It's coming from this community. It's coming from the things that bring you joy and your creativity, your work, right? All of this is feeding you. It's energizing you. And the light that you are is constantly being recharged. So how many of you feel super recharged at like 2 o'clock on Wednesdays? I do not. 2 o'clock on Wednesdays, it's kind of rough. Because to actually access all of that energy that is coming at us, to actually access all of that power, it just flows on by unless we're paying attention. We can walk through the parking lot to our car. Or we can walk through the parking lot to our car and stop to take 3 deep breaths with our face towards the sun, or a peony, or our child. We can sit at our computer for 8 hours and get our work done. Or we can sit at our computer for 8 hours with a timer that goes off every 45 minutes that reminds us to stop and take a breath and just think of someone we love. You see, these small moments give us access to our power. They give us access to recharge our light. There's a price to pay for recharging your light, and that price is your attention. Do you remember back when you first had a cell phone? And I can only speak for myself. Maybe you all managed your cell phones just fine. If I knew where mine was, it was dead all the time. I couldn't remember to plug that thing in to save my ever-loving life. I constantly, John was in childcare. That was the sole reason I got a cell phone. And I'd get to work and I'd grab my cell phone and be like, oh, hope he doesn't have an emergency today. Because the phone was dead, right? We had to learn how to make keeping our phones powered. We had to learn how to make that a habit and a priority. And the exact same thing is true of you. You get to make learning how to keep yourself recharged and filled up a priority. You do that by paying attention, and of course, you do that through spiritual practice. Listen, I don't have to tell you that this world needs you right now. You know that. You know that we need your light. You've been planted in your life with your skills and your network of people and experiences so that you can be the light in the dark places, and we need you. Loving reminder from Reverend Shannon this week. Oh, I loved her talk last week about sacred endings. And she was talking about how when we're at these crossroads of life, we're a choice. And we have the choice to either shrink back and try and stay safe and keep things the same, or we have the choice to grow and to bloom and to shine. And she so beautifully reminded us that trying to shrink never actually works. We're here to shine. So for every person who is shining the light of truth today, I just want to thank you. For those of you who are shining the light of truth on racism, my God, thank you. For every LGBTQIA plus person who is shining your light, even when it's hard and even when people tell you that they can't even see you for who you are, my God, thank you for continuing to shine. For every parent who is shining the light of love on their child, even when they keep talking about Minecraft and you do not care about Minecraft at all, at all, Melissa. But you shine the light of your attention because they are important and they belong and you love them. For every parent and grandparent who is sitting through another conversation about Minecraft, I thank you. For every one of you that may be facing a health challenge, with courage and with grace and with a little bit of humor, I know how hard that is. And I thank you for being a light in that dark place. For those of you for whom Father's Day is not a day of celebration, we see you and we thank you for choosing this path of healing and love and grace for yourself, but also for your family. For every person who is facing a dark time, and we all go through them, if this is your turn in a dark place, just keep shining and doing the best you can. And thank you for keeping going. And remember to let us shine in on you a little bit too. I was looking for a poem to read in honor of Father's Day when I came across this, and it just spoke directly to my heart. So I read this to honor you, dads, but the message is for all of us. It's called Shoulders by a beautiful poet named Naomi Shihab Nye. Naomi Shihab Nye. And it goes like this. A man crosses the street in rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south, because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him, no car drive too near his shadow. This man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say, fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide, and the rain will never stop falling. We must be willing to handle each other with care, with the tenderness that this father shows for his child. We must be willing to carry the sensitive cargo that is each other's hearts. We must be willing to carry our light into the dark places of this world. Your light. Just like Faith sang a few minutes ago, your light. You aren't the family you come from. You aren't your age. You aren't your race. You aren't the things in the past that you left behind. You aren't the things of the past that you pulled forward. You aren't your dreams. Your light. And all of those things, they inform who you are, but they are not who you are. The truth of you is love, and the truth of you is light. And this love and this light, they are your purpose and they are your saving grace. Your love and your light are our saving grace. And so I thank you. So the invitation this week is for you to bask in the light that you are. Pay attention to where that light is needed, and remember to recharge. Because we need you.